You are listening to Specifically for Seniors, a podcast designed for a vibrant and diverse senior community. I'm your host, Dr. Larry Barsh. Join me and a lineup of experts as we discuss a wide variety of topics that will empower, inform, entertain, and inspire as we celebrate the richness and wisdom of this incredible stage of life.
My guest today on Specifically for Seniors will be familiar to many of the listeners to this podcast. Maggie Scarf is a former visiting fellow at Whitney Humanities Center, Yale University, and a fellow of Jonathan Edwards College at Yale University. She was for many years a contributing editor to the New Republic and a member of the advisory board of the American Psychiatric Press. Maggie is the author of 7 books for adults, 2 books for children. She is the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including a Ford Foundation Fellowship and a Nieman Fellowship in Journalism at Harvard. She has received several national media awards from the American Psychological Foundation. Her articles have appeared in the New York Times, the New Republic, Psychology Today. Maggie has appeared on many television programs, including Oprah, The Today Show, Good Morning America, CBS News, and CNN, and has been interviewed extensively on radio and for magazines and newspapers across the nation. On a personal note, I am honored to be able to call Maggie a friend. Welcome to Specifically for Seniors, Maggie.
Thank you, Larry, for your very kind and gracious introduction.
Well, it's you. Maggie, let's talk about your educational background. Were you a psychologist by training?
No, I wasn't. In fact, I had 1 course in psychology when I was in college. I loved it, but I wanted to be a writer and I wanted to write children's fiction, and I majored in French literature. I'm a big reader.
But how did you become a writer?
Well, the way my career as a writer, and particularly a writer in psychological topics, is kind of a shaggy dog story. It happened in the most absurd way when I look back on it, because I moved from having that 1 course in psychology to years later, the Washington Post calling me the foremost voice in America on psychological topics, which was quite an arc of distance.
Your books focus on writings on relationships, family dynamics, and personal development. Why those subjects? What brought you to that field?
I'd have to start way back to tell you how I even got to a point where an editor would entertain the idea that I would write a book. And that was the following. I was a faculty wife at Yale. My husband taught economics. I was the mom of 3 daughters, and they were school age. And with the youngest one going to school, I had time on my hands. So I thought, well, I'll get a part-time job. And I went for 2 possible part-time jobs. One was doing articles for the Yale Alumni Magazine, and the other was doing radio interviews for the Yale radio station, WELI. So as a matter of fact, I got both jobs. So I did several articles, one on an American art opening at the museum. And then I did an article on a new ward. And this was the beginning. This was a ward where they were doing very new things. It was being done at Yale and at Langley Porter in California, in San Francisco. And what they were doing was beginning the use of drugs, which was quite new at the time, and a form of social engineering called milieu therapy. The word milieu is a French word just meaning the social environment. And this was engineering the social environment as a form of treatment. Now, the Yale Psychiatric Department was just filled with Freudians. I mean, they wouldn't look at a drug. This was anathema. And also, they tended to have hospitals which were away from the community. This was a ward inside the Yale New Haven Hospital. So it was just quite new. So I went over and asked about writing an article, about them doing an article. I knew nothing about it. And they said, yeah, we'll sort of play act what goes on here. We'll do a little program and you can take it to WELI. I took it to WELI. They wanted no part of it. They were horrified. They just, what? What is this stuff? So I had the transcript written out for me. Somebody typed it out. And then I looked at it and I thought, my God, this is fascinating. So I went back to this ward at Yale New Haven Hospital and I asked them if I could hang around, learn what they're doing. They said, sure, you can do it. Both the head of the psychiatric services at the hospital and the head of that ward gave me permission, but they said, we don't want to upset the patients, so say you're doing a psychological experiment. So that began what was a 6-month period of following the patients around, sitting behind the one-way mirror, just taking part in all the discussions that discussed each patient. And I had been there. I was there around 6 months, but I had been there about a month when one of the patients, that was a kid who was, I think, a senior at Yale, and had a psychotic break and decided he was a frog. Occasionally, he would have bouts of being a frog and start hopping around. But one time when he wasn't hopping around, he came up to me and he said, who are you and why are you hanging around here? And I said, oh, I'm doing psychological research. And he said, oh, that's interesting. What is it on? And boy, that stopped me cold. It was on. So I said to him, to tell you the truth, I'm a journalist. He said, you're a journalist? Wow. He said, that is so exciting. Are you going to write about us? And then he ran, told the other patients, and they all got excited. They were so happy because here they were going to be written about. So I went along. I thought I'd be kicked off the ward after that incident, but nothing happened. So I continued along and I followed them daily, every day for 6 months. And the experiences were fascinating. I mean, sitting behind the one-way mirror is in itself a surreal experience because, for instance, there was this beautiful, beautiful young woman who had come in after a suicide attempt when an affair with her therapist broke up. And there she was, sitting, looking, the group therapy's going on. I'm watching it. Usually other people were with me, but at that point I was alone. And she's primping and she's looking at herself and paying no attention to anybody else in the group. And I'm sitting there, God, I feel such a jerk sitting beside, I wanted to say, quit it, stop it, look at the other people. Anyhow, I did that and I wrote an article. And when I wrote that article, I thought, hey, this is pretty good. I'm not going to send this to the alumni magazine. I'm going to send it to the New York Times. And I talked to my husband about it, and he said, are you kidding? That's impossible. They'll never take anything off the street from an unknown. They will take things from the top of the piles of the best agents. It's ridiculous. Don't bother. I said, well, what the heck? I could try. So I called them up and I said, how long are your articles? And the person who answered the phone told me. She said, but don't think in any way that this is a assignment or anything to, oh, no, I said. So I then wrote it up and I sent it in. 2 weeks later, I got a call. They said, we're taking this. Who are you? So I thought for a minute. I couldn't say I'm somebody who had one course in psychology. so what I said was, oh, I'm the person who wrote that article. They said, great. So that was that. They gave me assignment after assignment. I did cover stories on electrical stimulation of the brain, sex hormones and behavior, sleep disorders. I just was a fetus, a person. I did one cover article after another. And this was at a time when the Times Magazine was really taken very seriously in academic. It was not snazzy the way it is now. In fact, it was losing money, but it had a lot of kind of it was taken seriously. It had gravitas. And so anyhow, that was my career, which was this odd thing that I was able to take these different subjects, absorb them quickly, do interviews, do the research, and of course for that first article about that mental ward, I did enormous amounts of research. So, and then I would sort of stir them up in my brain like a washing machine and come out with articles that were informative, entertaining, told you what was going on, and I just loved doing it. I found my métier in this very strange way.
So, how did that lead to the 7 books?
Well, as you can imagine, once my name was out there, editors started to write to me and say, wouldn't you care to write a book with us? Doubleday, Random House, Simon and Schuster. And I couldn't quite think of a topic, though I did really want to start writing a book because rushing from topic to topic was really hard work. And so one day I was walking through the Yale Co-op, which is the same as the Harvard Coop, and I looked at a book and I saw that it was called Women in Depression. And no, it was just called Depression. And I thought, that might have been a good topic. And I said, but of course somebody's done it. I think it was Women and Depression. Anyhow, I started leafing through it and I realized that it was all statistics. But what crazy statistics. There was study after study after study showing that in every single study done anywhere, anytime, on any group, in any country, if you looked at the statistics, the outcome was that there were at least 3 to 6 or more women to every man who was feeling depressed, who was in a depression, in a clinical depression. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. And I thought, I think I'll do a book on that, interview a bunch of women and see what it's about. And so I got permission from the same ward to start there. And I started doing a series of interviews. And I did those interviews both at Yale. I did them up at Dartmouth when one of the clinical professors moved up there. I did them at Mass General when I was on a Nieman Fellowship. And I wrote chapter after chapter, all mixed up, one chapter after another. And then by then I had an agent, and she said, why don't you put it in a life cycle format? Bang, that did it. And I did it over the adolescence, 20s, 30s. In other words, I did issues. In fact, the title is Pressure Points in the Lives of Women, and it was called Unfinished Business. Nobody thought it was going to be a great seller. Depression, huh? But as a matter of fact, it just opened a huge subject and found it was a bestseller, and it found a very large audience, and it was translated everywhere. Spain, Portugal, Holland, Germany, France, even China. And so that started my book writing business.
And the other books followed along in that line of topic?
Well, I was always interested in relationship issues, but of course, with this kind of subject, the obvious next subject, since so many of the issues were around relationships, was marriage. And so I did a book on marriage called Intimate Partners, Patterns in Love and Marriage, which was filled with a lot of new information, again, my thing was just gathering new things. And so I not only described the ways in which people put their intimate relationships together, all the factors that go into it, which you don't think about when you're falling in love. And with that, I also added tasks, things people could do to help straighten out tense relationships. And there was a series of 4. I could describe one of the easiest ones to you. Would you like that?
Mm-hmm. Please do.
That is called talking and listening. And that involves, say, the couple taking an hour out of their week. Just say, we'll take Wednesday nights when the kids are asleep, 7 to 8. So say it's you and me. We flip a coin. Guess what? I win. Heads win. And so I go first. And I get to talk and you get to listen, but you cannot interfere. You cannot say a word. And I cannot talk about you, or I can talk about nothing but myself. My hopes, my joys, my hurts, my fantasies, all me, separate from you. This stops the kind of back and forth that happens in tense, where I say something and you say, oh no, you're wrong. No, you cannot interfere. And I sit there for a half hour and I don't talk about our relationship and I don't say a word about you. I only talk about me. Then it's your turn to get the microphone. You have the same set of instructions. I keep my mouth shut, you talk. You tell me what's going on with your job, with your work, with your research, with your life, with your feelings about yourself, whether you're feeling up or down, how you see your life, how you for things, whatever has to do with you as a separate person. And then when the task is done, we don't say a word about it to each other. We just drop it. Now, if we're in therapy, that would be the assignment. We would bring it to the therapist. But say you're doing these tasks yourself, you let maybe 3, 4 days go by, and then you can pick it up and talk about it. And the next week, we have the task again. Since I went first, you go first, and we do the same thing. It's a good way of promoting separateness instead of, let's say, uh, I'm feeling really bad about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I knit at you until you are really pissed at me and you're saying how bad I am. And then I can say, he thinks I'm bad, but I don't think I'm bad. In other words, it's a way of me sparing myself from saying you feel bad about yourself. I can instead get angry at you. So this is a good way of pulling apart those things where you may be holding the anger for me and I'm saying I'm not angry. It's a wonderful task.
Wow. Yeah, I've got to sit and think about that for a while. Um, Going from there, you said you wanted to write children's novels, but you did end up writing a couple of children's books.
Wrote a children's book on Franklin, on Benjamin Franklin, and one on Antarctica. But what I had really hoped to do was write children's books. I never could make it. Just didn't. Almost, but never did it. Instead, I wrote all these other things.
That sort of took some time, I would imagine. We talked a little bit about writing for the New York Times and how that started your career as a book writer. Was that the way that your journalism writing came to be, just by sending in an article as an unknown?
It was just unthinkable, but it happened.
Amazing. And that led to 6, 7 books.
Yeah.
And
when I was in England for a year, I got an assignment from the Times to write about a psychologist, Sir John Bowlby, his name was, and he had a theory on mother-child attachment, and he defined different kinds of attachment and so on. So I wrote an article. The Times refused it. They said, "So, babies need mothers. Tell me something new." As a matter of fact, he became a big force in psychology, and he was a huge background theorist for my book on women and depression, all about attachments and the tremendous importance of attachment to women.
from all of this, you ended up on television with Oprah, Today's Show, Good Morning America. What was that like?
It was, I cannot describe it. It was so crazy. It was beyond imagining. Once I went on the Oprah show as the quote expert, and there was a woman. Well, the people coming in to be the interviewees were women who were having affairs that their husbands didn't know about. This on national television.
It's a good place to keep a secret.
I thought, are they going to get anybody? Well, they did. And I was in the green room getting makeup put on me, and a woman is in there, and she said, "I thought you were going to put on all these little check marks, to cover my face." "Oh, no," they said, "we're going to use sunglasses." I'm sitting there and thinking, sunglasses? This is really off the wall. So they didn't pressure her. They said, "If you don't want to go on, it's okay with us, She decided to go on. Well, the way the Oprah show is run is the quote expert, which is me, is sitting in another room for the first 20 minutes while Oprah interviews her. And then I'm brought on for the later part of the show. So while I'm in the green room, I'm watching her, and she says, "Boy, I don't hope my husband isn't watching this because he makes rifles." Of course, I nearly fell off my chair. I thought, "Lady, you're suicidal." So they brought me out there. I had the interview. Later on, I was in the limo with her. We were both going to O'Hare Airport. And I said to her, your husband doesn't really make rifles, does he? Oh, yeah, she says, he does. But I said he made Rimini something rifles, not sniper rifles or some different. And I thought, help. I never heard what happened. Of course, once the door shut on the Oprah show, it was over. Another time I was on, and they had an anthropologist who said that love relationships only lasted for 3 years because that's when babies became independent. I looked at her and I said, so what does the kid do? Go out and rent an apartment or what? You're not supposed to be nasty. Oprah. Take it.
And your books brought you into a lot of book tours as well?
Oh, endless. I there for somebody who cares to go to sleep at night, I would in the morning have a TV show, couple of newspapers after that, maybe another TV show in the afternoon. And then the next day, the whole routine all over again. I My head was so mixed up, but of course, so were all the TV producers are young. They're all starting out as interns. I came into Boston to be on a TV show in the morning, and the girl runs up to me and shakes my hand and says, "Hi, I'm Maggie Scarf." And I looked at her and I said, "Then who am I?" I mean, not only is the poor guest crazy, you're running into everyone else who's going crazy.
One more question. If you were asked to write an article for the New York Times now, and you were given free rein as to what you'd like to talk about, your choice, what would it be?
I'm a total politics junkie. I follow politics very, very carefully all the time, anywhere and everywhere. I don't think I'd have something new to write, but I guess what's on my mind at the moment is the absolute horror of the Supreme Court, which is tearing the Constitution to bits, even as we sit here. Uh, there's nothing we can do about the fact that Thomas should recuse himself. There's nothing that the American public can do about it. We're sitting here watching uh, our democracy just torn up, and I'm so hoping, doing everything I can, which is mostly sending money to uh, to people whom I'm backing, but I'm fearful as I have never in my lifetime. What's happened since Trump appeared on the scene
Mm-hmm.
is hard to think of.
What would you advise we do about the Supreme Court?
I don't know. I think I can't think of anything besides an uprising of the public. But the way I see it happening is that the Republicans are voted out, and that a Democratic Congress holds them up and stops it. It's really it's really a sort of a republic in the worst word of the in the worst way, taking over with extremist views. And if we can't stop it, we're cooked.
Would you advocate for enlarging the size of the Supreme Court?
Yes. Yes, I certainly would. That would be a good way to handle it. I know that Biden hasn't wanted to, but it should be done. I
Yeah,
mean, it's become clear that it should be done. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I agree too. I sort of would go for term limits in the Supreme Court
I would also.
because I think some of the trouble came up with a well-meaning justice who didn't retire when she probably should have.
Yes, it did start there, and she's been held up as a great saint, but she surely has not behaved in a saintly way toward the country. She was ill.
And I don't know how it would be accomplished, but I would advocate for equality in political thought in the Supreme Court for conservatives, for liberals. Not an odd number.
You never know
And
when it turn around and be something else.
no odd number, because if the Supreme Court can't compromise and come to one solution that unites two disparate points of view, I don't know how Congress can do it.
Well, here we are.
But nobody asked me to be president, and
You know, the problem with that is that somebody who comes on to the Supreme Court with a certain kind of thought process could turn around and be different once they get on the court. So you could never promise that you could get that 4-4 setup.
No, but you can try.
Yeah, we're all thinking about it, but I think it's in the voting that any resolution is going to happen. And one thing is certainly clear, and that is that Trump has his base, but he has never tried to enlarge his base, and his base is not large enough to prevail in a general election. And so he's not up for winning a general election. So unless he thinks he's going to start another insurrection, but I don't think he is. Nobody showed up in New York when he called his people to come. He was saying thousands had come, but no one had come.
What disturbs me and provides an example as to what must have happened in a lot of countries when you got an authoritarian dictator, and you say to yourself, how can that happen? And we had the example of one man disrupting a 250-year-old institution.
It's true. But he hasn't succeeded completely yet. So we can hold our breath, cross our fingers, and do whatever we can in whatever ways we can.
Yeah. Maggie, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me back.
We won't talk about that.
Okay.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, Larry.
If you found this podcast interesting, fun, or helpful, tell your friends and family, and click on the follow or subscribe button. We'll let you know when new episodes are available. You've been listening to Specifically for Seniors. We'll talk more next time. Stay connected.